As in our personal lives, change in organizations is inevitable. And just like in our personal lives, organizational change is often disruptive and something we prefer to avoid. Now, the fact of the matter is that to be an agent of change, leadership has to be prepared to be the first to change. In the next two episodes, we'll focus on the process of transition and change. In the organizations that we lead or are part of, change is usually motivated by some sort of problem. And we often avoid change until the status quo becomes more painful than the necessary change. But every organization, every church has problems. What is interesting is that we all come to problems with a different perspective. Most think that problems are inherently negative, but problems in and of themselves are not necessarily bad. They can give meaning to life and can even be a blessing as they produce creative tension. The key to overcoming problems is having the right attitude towards the problem. And problems are solvable. There's actually basically two types of problems. There's task problems and people problems. Now, task problems are usually solved more quickly, while people problems take more time. Those who have responsibility to lead organizations need to be the ones to recognize problems before they become emergencies. Sometimes as a leader, it seems we're always on the lookout for problems, but how do we recognize if something is a real problem? Well, I think there are several ways we can do this. We can do this by asking questions, gathering the data and getting feedback from others. All of this can help us define the problem and then make the decision, something we looked at in our last episode on team building. Now, the process of problem solving begins with identifying the problem. As in our personal life, change is impossible until we identify what the real problem is. Then we also need to prioritize the problem, since we can't solve all the problems at once. In order to find the problem, we need to ask the right questions and talk to the right people. We have to get to the hard facts without making faulty assumptions. See, solving problems always has to do with people, and so we need to select who is involved and best suited to deal with the problem. From this will come possible solutions from which to choose and then implement. And then after the implementation, we should then evaluate the solution. Now, what I've really found interesting is that the assumptions we have of others will have a huge impact on how we deal with problems and people. Our assumptions determine how we treat people. I'm not sure what your basic assumptions of others is, but let me offer you a few that will help us as we deal with others. The first reality is that everyone wants to feel worthwhile. This kind of seems rather obvious, but we sometimes forget to treat people in this way. If we really believed that everyone wanted to feel worthwhile, we'd interact with them differently, wouldn't we? We also need to begin from the point of view that everyone needs and responds to encouragement, which is curious as to why some leaders default to manipulation, guilt, and fear. This may work short term, but it drives people away in the long run. It is also important to remember that people generally are loyal to a person and not a position or even an organization. And another assumption that seems somewhat counterintuitive is that most people do not know how to be successful. They don't necessarily know the steps it takes to get there. And success is a result of planning and is a process learned from experience and failure. And also, most people are naturally motivated by the desire to make a significant contribution. They want to participate in the goals. They're motivated by recognition and clear expectations. But people are demotivated by belittling, manipulation, insensitivity, and lack of opportunity for personal growth. As you can see, if we have these assumptions or others on our team, we'll interact and relate to them in completely different ways than if we think they're motivated by guilt, don't want to make a contribution, or not interested in growing. This is not to say that everyone responds to change with the same level of enthusiasm. Sociological studies have shown that there are several typical reactions to change. On one hand of the scale, there are the innovators or the dreamers. It's usually about 2%. They're the originator of ideas, but are often not seen as leaders or even influencers of others. Next are around about 10% of the early adopters. These are those who know a good idea when they see it and are usually those who will influence others in the process. Now, most of us are middle adopters, somewhere in the 60% in the middle of the pack. We generally want things to remain the way they are for as long as possible, but we can be influenced to make a change if required. Now, late adopters, typically around 20% of people, often begin with a negative outlook, but they'll accept change if it is decided upon by the majority. Then you have the 8 or so percent who are on the other end of the scale, who are kind of the stragglers. They're more committed to the past and the future, may even cause division and problems as the change is introduced and implemented. But why do people resist change? Why does everyone not just get on board and become excited about the new opportunities? Well, I think there are several legitimate reasons for this. People usually resist change that they've not initiated. They cannot accept or own it. Additionally, we are creatures of habit, so it can be as simple as we just don't want to change our routine or be disrupted. Now, at a deeper level, we fear the unknown and are more comfortable with old problems rather than new solutions. People also resist change if the purpose for the change seems unclear. And most of us fear failure, and so change seems to be synonymous with potential failure. Kind of the why fix it if it ain't broke attitude. People intuitively know that the change will mean that they will lose something, and don't always see how they will gain. The gain that they will get will outweigh the losses. Generally, people are comfortable with the way things are. Now, no one is a blank slate. Every member of our team has usually already adopted or developed a negative outlook to change based on past disappointments and previous visions that have failed by other leaders. This often results in a lack of respect for any leadership as they link them with these failures. Now, we'll look at this more after the break, but we have to be honest that in some sense, everyone is part of 3 groups in the change process. Those who will lose, those who are neutral, and those who will benefit. As a leader, we need to identify who is in each group and help our members do the same. And let's be honest, not all change is a good idea. Change for change's sake usually never produces positive outcomes. Change will not produce positive results if it's just a bad idea. Change is also a net negative if it is not accepted by the key influencers of the group, or if it is not presented effectively and clearly. Change is not seen as just self-serving to the leadership will usually not end up well and not produce a healthy team or organization. Change that happens too often or made too quickly is also what we could call bad change. Okay, so after the break, I want to focus on the process of change a bit more and how we can bring about change in our teams and our churches.
This series is based upon our MCNet coaching and ministry guides. There are basically 2 parts to the series, 12 episodes that cover the 5 sections of the coaching guide and 18 episodes that cover the 8 workshops of the ministry guide. As a team, we have had the opportunity to serve in various parts of the world over the last decades using these materials to equip leaders and coach ministry teams throughout our ministry coaching network. These ministry team workshops in episodes 13 to 30 are intended to equip members of the body as they serve on ministry teams. The importance of mentoring, team building, and multiplication strategies are discussed here, and these workshops coincide with the leadership team coaching in episodes 1 to 12, which cover big picture issues that affect the whole ministry. Each workshop has several episodes and can be listened to independently, though if you have the time, it would be helpful to listen to all of them, as they are connected and build upon each other. A couple of the workshops have only one introductory episode here, as the topic is covered in greater depth in another of Phil's podcast series, for which you will find links below. You can also check out our Christian Leadership Institute training program. This is a unique approach to ministerial training based on a competency-focused mentorship. The free materials for this series, as well as the coaching and ministry guides, are available from the links in the description box below. Just as many others have, we are sure you will find our other Leadership Matters podcast series helpful for you and your ministry.
Helping others through the process of change means that we'll need to change first. We model change for others. Change begins with leadership before others will embrace the change. And this begins with developing trust in others. To do this, we need to take responsibility and be willing to take risks. If we're disorganized, lack follow-through, or just insecure, defensive, and inflexible, it's unlikely that others are likely going to join us in our great adventure of making the necessary changes to realize this new vision. As change relates to our churches or organizations, it's important to understand the history and the culture of that church or organization. Why are things done the way they are done? We also need to appreciate how much change the church has already gone through and how these changes were accepted. As the saying goes, it's important to know why the fence was first put up before we tear it down. There might actually be a mean dog or neighbor on the other side. So we have to take the time to understand the values and cultures of the group before any changes are introduced. And we discussed this in our leadership episodes of episodes 1 to 12. Now, in those episodes, we discovered that changing one's part of the system, just one part of the system, has an impact on the whole system. We have to understand that all systems gravitate towards homeostasis, kind of a fancy way of saying that a system wants to live in balance. So when change is necessary, we have to take into consideration that sometimes groups need more freedom as they move forward, and other times there's greater need for stability and predictability. To err on one side may bring about stagnation, and to err on the other side may bring about chaos and confusion. To be healthy, a balanced equilibrium is needed where these two tensions are balanced according to the needs at the time. Change is actually made up of the change, the actual situation that is changing, the external tangible elements, and transition, which has to do with the internal psychological processes that individuals go through in response to dealing with the change. The external change may be easy to pull off, but we have to be aware that it takes time for the real transition to occur. To underestimate this dynamic will make it hard for others to accept the change and unwillingness to embrace the transitions necessary. For example, I can move to another city in a day or two, depending on how much stuff I have. But to feel at home in that other city will take much longer. The actual change can happen overnight, but the transition takes time. A conflict usually occurs not because of the change itself, but often due to the improper management of the process of transition. So how can we help people through transitions? Well, first we have to provide the opportunity for people to share what they feel they are losing. This may be subjective, but it is important for them to acknowledge what they feel they are giving up. We have to think through who will lose what and what they are letting go. What is going to be over for everyone? Secondly, we need to allow people to grieve over what they are giving up. Those steps of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and so on. It may also be important to compensate members for the loss or apparent loss. Are there ways we can replace the loss and help individuals with what they might be giving up? In this process of transition, then, it is important to give as much information as possible. The reality is that in a vacuum of information, people tend to think the worst, so you may as well err on the side of more information, not less. So we need to take the time to define what is over and what will not be replaced. Without this, people will often overreact and assume more is being given up than actually will be. And finally, we need to have a clear way of marking the end and bringing closure to what is changing. This means treating the past with respect, and in some way letting members take some of the past with them, rather than shaming or blaming them for being part of that past. At what point that past was a fresh start that had meaning to many. And disregarding this will only unnecessarily alienate people. So as we implement change, there are some practical ways that you may find helpful in your context. The first, I think, is to help identify the influencers. Now, I'm not talking about an internet personality, but those who others look up to. It is important to put them in roles where they can positively influence others. They are those who can help all of us move forward in the transition. Also, it's important that the leadership team has emotional support. As we know, transition is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's hard to do on our own. And then before the change is ready for prime time, as I mentioned, it will be important to get the support of key influencers, those natural leaders of others. How will this change affect them and in what ways? It is most effective to bring together those groups who are in positive camps, while it is better to meet individually with those who are more in the negative camp. Now, once the change, as I said, is ready for prime time, it is important to communicate this publicly. This usually includes items for information, items that need to be tabled for further discussion, and those action items on which decisions have to be made. This is where influencers can influence others before this more public meeting and show how the change will benefit each of them. This allows people the time to take ownership of the change and embrace it as their own. Now, when it comes to making changes, even necessary ones, it is possible to move either too quickly or too slowly. Now, if we move too quickly, it usually means that we have not considered all the ramifications or taken into account the difference between the change and the reaction to the change. There's also the danger of isolating potential allies or changing quicker than our structure can assimilate. However, it's also possible to change too slowly and miss the window of opportunity. If we wait too long, others will be less tolerant of missteps and people can actually begin to permanently own the status quo. Now, in this scenario, change becomes even more difficult. Okay, so as I wrap up, let me add a few more thoughts regarding change in decision making. We can take either a bureaucratic, a paternal, a shared approach, or make the decision necessary in order to bring about this change. In a bureaucratic approach, there's a hierarchical chain of command where uniform policies attempt to deal with all the rights and duties. In this approach, relationships tend to be more impersonal and the roles are standardized, built based on technical competency. Now, a paternal approach can be expressed in various ways. It can either be a benevolent, autocratic way, kind of the attitude, trust me, we'll take care of you. But there can also be a dependent model where people expect the leadership to take care of them and make all the decisions. Organizations sometimes develop a culture of control where the prevalent attitude is someone has to be in charge, and in this case, it is us. Or perhaps attempting to create compliance, kind of the keep quiet and do your job approach. However, there's an alternative to a bureaucratic or paternal approach to decision making. I would characterize this as an empowering and releasing attitude. This is a shared decision making partnership based on servanthood model. People are given the right to disagree without guilt and manipulation. There's a balance of power as well as joint accountability. Status symbols and perks are eliminated as much as possible. While the shared outcome of this decision does not necessarily guarantee everyone gets their way, an inclusive approach ensures that every member has meaning and we learn to speak the truth in love. Now, this workshop is part of our team coaching series created to assist those serving in the body of Christ. The goal is to help you and your team grow healthy, multiplying churches. Now, this workshop corresponds to the leadership team coaching in episodes 1 to 12. Now, the complete workshop, Change Dynamics, is covered here in episodes 22 and 23, and it's also available as a download. This workshop is part of the Coach's Playbook discussed in Section 3 of Leadership Team Coaching, which was in episodes 7 to 10. You can also follow the links to the free resources for this workshop, which include a leadership transition and organizational change assessments, as well as a relational health for organizations assessment. And don't forget to check out some of my other podcasts, such as the Fivefold Ministry podcast series, where I discuss this topic in greater depth. In our next episode, we're going to conclude this workshop on change dynamics by introducing the organizational life cycle and how this can be used to indicate the changes that may be necessary at an organizational level. The change principles from this episode will definitely come in handy, so I hope you join me then.